Hello, honeydews, and welcome back to Sippin' and Bitchin', where the drinks are icy and the book talk is spicy. We're on episode 9, part 3, and I think I'm Sam. I think. Jury's out right now.
And I'm Steph. As you can tell, Sam sounds super sexy.
So sexy.
That's the theme we're going with for today.
Yeah.
Upon reflection, we haven't done a lot of chapters yet, but I do think that we are doing a great conversation discussion on it. So, if you're on part 3, welcome. If you haven't started the book, maybe you don't read or don't start with part 3. Go back to part 1.
Don't worry, you can, if you haven't read the series, you could probably read it before we finish recording all the chapters on this book. Because this is part 3, and we're starting on chapter 10, so we have a long way to go.
That is also true, but that's okay. We're all friends here. It's for the content. Honestly, realistically, if we could record every single day, we would be done in a month.
If we could record more than one part a day, we'd be good. But our schedules are not aligning very well right now, so we're doing what we can.
Yes, exactly.
I blame Steph because she's a traveling whore, but anyways.
I have nothing nice to say, so my mom told me to not say anything at all.
Oh, I'm keeping that comment to myself.
As we have read every episode so far for this book, I am going to read the note to the reader from Jennifer about this book because it is very important. Clearing my throat.
Sound like me now.
No, just not as congested, honey. This book contains themes and or discussions that some readers may find difficult to read. While there are no graphic scenes, there is mention of sexual assault, suicide, the death of children, and discussions of verbal, psychological, and physical abuse. If you need to talk with somebody about your experiences, there are people waiting to help, and then there are resources that, of course, I will put in the description of this video and episode. So, now that we got that said and done, let's move on to chapter 10. It would help if I got to chapter 10. With us meeting our besties, we are finally all congregating into the Chamber of Madness. I don't know why this is still plugged in. So Sarah and Ash are heading to go meet with everyone to discuss their plans for Collis. And let me tell you, Sarah walks in and she already hates everything. You want to know why?
They be a bowing.
They're all bowing. She walks in and she's like, "What is everyone doing?" And then Rahar. Oh, okay, this is so funny that we have this conversation, but we always compare the From Blood and Ash group, like the ensemble, to the Flesh and Fire ensemble. And typically in 99.7% of scenarios, we like the From Blood and Ash ensemble. And then we like Sarah and Niktos as a couple. Anyway, that's a further discussion for another time. But in this chapter, this really this ensemble shines.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Because that's one thing we talked about before is that we love the group dynamic more From Blood and Ash because you see that interaction more. Mm-hmm. And it's a bigger part of their story. Whereas in this one, they kind of started to get that. Then, oh no, Sarah tried to betray them. And so it was really rough for a while. But in this book, with her being who she is, you really get to see those group dynamics come out again. And it makes you think, oh man, now I really like the group of this. But so yeah, this is where they actually get to be that family and that group that we love from Blood and Ash.
Correct. So Rahar goes, "We are bowing to you, Mia Liesa." And she's all like, "You don't need to do that. You don't need to call me that. And Ash is like, "It's tradition to greet the primal of life in such a manner." And Sarah goes, "Gods are supposed to bow to any primal, which none of them do for you." And Ash goes, "That's because I don't require it of them." And she's like, "I don't either." And everyone's like, "You're different. You're the true primal of life, and this is how they honor you whenever you enter the same space as them." Imagine, just every time you walk into a place, people just bow at you.
I would never go anywhere.
I would stay in my house.
You do.
And then she's like, "They don't have to do this." And then she's like, "Wait, are they supposed to do this every time?" And Ash is like, "Yes." And she goes,
Keep in
"Nope, we are
mind, they're
not."
fighting about this while everyone is still bowing, waiting to be allowed to rise.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Nope, we're not doing this every time I enter a chamber. I will lose my mind." And then Scion pops in. Please don't do that. We've already dealt with one Supreme Ruler who wasn't quite right in the head, which honestly, true. Um, and Ash is like, all you have to do is command that they don't. And then he's like, "But perhaps you should give them permission to rise first." And she goes, "You couldn't have reminded me that at the beginning." It's so
Still
funny.
not telling them to rise. It takes like 2 whole pages before she does. It's great.
Correct. Essentially that's how this mostly goes. Um, and Ash just is like, "You haven't given them permission," and she says, "For fuck's sake." And Ash is like, "There are younglings present," and then she's like, "How about you go?" And well, then she cuts herself off because of Jadis. And then she talks about getting a headache, and Belle's like, "I don't think you can get headaches, honey." And well, everyone rises, and Sion's like, "Thank the fates," as in true Sion fashion, honestly. And I respect that. And then she commands that none of them bow to her because she enters a chamber.
Your
Which I
command
would
is
do.
our will.
Yeah, no, so, they say that your command is our will, and then Belle tacks on Mia Liesa, and, and Sarah's like, "You're just trying to annoy me." And
Yep.
honestly, same. Would you rather have everyone bow to you every time you enter a chamber, or call you Mia Liesa every time they're trying to talk to you?
It'd never go anywhere.
I think I would rather people call me Mia Liesa every time I walk in somewhere. But, I also have it
Yeah.
tattooed on my body, so here we are.
I mean, I would prefer that over other stuff, but still, it'd be like, just call me by my name. Thank you. Ash, he could call me it whenever he wants. Like that, it's sexy coming from him. Let's be honest.
I think that's a different tone, a different,
yes,
not a different meaning, but like a different tone. And then Belle sees Sarah's eyes, and she's like, "Holy shit, your eyes!" And then Ash is like, "Are beautiful." And and Sarah's like, "If that was supposed to be a compliment, it sounded more like a threat." And Belle's like, "Yeah, it did." And then Belle's like, "They are amazing." And honestly, I guess I would be pretty shocked if my eyes were like completely, like not completely different, but like really changed. I feel like I would like not shit myself, but I'd be like, "Oh snap, crackle pop" kind of vibe. I don't know. And they're all like, "I've never seen eyes like that." And Sarah's like, "Ash thinks it's because I was mortal, but yes, they are super unique and weird." And Ash is like, "And beautiful." He's really just trying to milk this for all it's worth. It's fine.
he's giving, doesn't want her to feel self-conscious and weird about her new body, and it's sweet, but at the same time, he's going a little heavy with it. We love a
Yes.
protective man.
And like if y'all don't remember or realize, but this is the first time she's seeing everybody since
She's
she's
ascended.
been back.
Yeah.
And since she's, became the true primal of life. So everyone is just like, "We're all glad that, we're getting on your nerves. We're glad that you're back." And Rahar's like, because they keep betting on them arguing. And Rahar's like, "And you have no idea how happy I am to be making really bad bets." And Sarah's just like, "I'm only partly sorry that you keep losing your money because, well, and this is a true illustration of them as an ensemble and as
Mm-hmm.
them like going back and forth. And it's weird because she was away for so long. So like I want to say this, it's a very different situation than with Poppy. Like Poppy was with them and earned their trust and respect.
Right.
And with Sarah, she wasn't really around, but still earned their trust and respect. And I think that says a lot.
Right.
That's also different levels of power at this point, but like if we're getting into the logistics of it all, like
Well, and it's different because, like, in Sarah's dynamic, she was a traitor to them, and that's how they saw her for the longest time. And
mhm,
yet it was also confusing because she was a traitor who was also fighting alongside them to save the Shadowlands.
mhm.
And for a while, she was just someone who carried the embers, but now she is that essence. She is the primal of life. So she was like kidnapped as someone who had the embers and came back as their queen. Like that's wild.
And I just think like, and I know they had some time to kind of process that, but I just think that that would be such like a not culture shock, but like just like a shock in general.
Yeah.
Especially when your kingdom and your like life has been the same for so long, and like finally
And
things are changing,
especially
kind of thing.
since when she was ascended, they felt that shift. They felt that change of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like even in their essence, that's kind of weird for them to like get a grip on, is feeling that shift.
Yep.
They haven't felt
And
something like that since Ethos.
that too, and then when Rain comes in too, and he, you know, is glad that she's back or whatever, and she kind of has this internal dialogue about like how like their evolution of their relationship, and so she grasps his forearm, and he got a little electric charge, a little shocky, um, which I really enjoyed this whole not static electricity, but essentially static electricity. Um, and they're all getting ready to get seated and discuss their plans. And Ash calls Sarah Liesa, and Belle's like, "Well, why does he get to call you that?" And Ash goes, "Because she enjoys it when I call her that." You little stinky. Um, and then they're talking about how people have come to many gods have been arriving in the Shadowlands the last several days, coming from many courts, and they're talking about housing. Um, and we hear about insulas, which we haven't heard that before. I wonder if Atlanteans have like that same kind of not infrastructure because they're like more modern and whatever considering the
Right.
times. But those are several stories, tall houses that can have up to 40 people or so. And then when you see the lights of Lethe, I don't know, pronunciation, you're likely seeing those buildings. I believe those mortals would call them tenements, but they're not as properly outfitted kind of vibe. So then they're talking about housing and making sure that they could house people and that they have enough food for everyone. Essentially, she's putting on her mama bear hat,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine.
It's
Um,
cute.
and so she's worried about food, and Ash is just like, we'll worry about tomorrow's problem, like that we have enough food for right now. Like anything else outside of that, like don't worry about it.
It's giving, don't borrow tomorrow's problems today.
That's he does say, but we have to get to tomorrow, so here we are.
Yep.
So we're all here to talk about Colas and what we're going to do, and Bella's all like, I have a suggestion, just hunt them down and hunt him down, rehearse, like I second that, and Ash is like, that's part of the plan, but we have to get to that part first. And Belle's like, well, why can't we skip to that part? Because I know what Colas will do once he's done licking his wounds. And Sarah's like, well, what is that? And Belle is just like, gather his loyalists and hunt us down and attack. So essentially, war is inevitable in this situation, which we kind of already knew.
Yep.
But, you know, here we are.
It's like that either wait to be attacked or be the one to strike first is essentially what they're deciding.
Yeah, and so Layla comes in, you know, kind of with a little bit of common sense or some sort of reasoning. Hunting him down and attacking is not really a plan, and like they can't remove him permanently, so they have to plan for how to handle him for right now. Um, and essentially, it's like he's not going to pretend like Sarah didn't ascend, and like not, that his whole, essentially that he's not at risk because he is at risk. Um, and he'll hold court to kind of remind people and himself that he's in charge. Um, And Belle's like, yeah, but he's only playing king while everyone knows a queen rules. And I wonder, like, how far that delusion can really go. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you have a bunch of power and you can't necessarily die, but, like, how much power do you really have when, like, this
I
big
don't
baddie just, ooh.
I don't even think it's delusion. Like they know who the primal of life is. Like they can sense it. There's no like there's literally no denying it. It's just a matter of deciding whose side you're going to be on. A lot of them are on Colas' side because they've either become corrupt over time or they're just afraid of what they've experienced over the past years that they're sticking with the person that has threatened them the most. But I don't really think there's truly any denying who Sarah is. Like, not when
That's
they
what I'm
have their
saying.
magic that can feel it. Like, it's
Mm.
impossible.
Um. Also, they make a comment about how there's a queen that rules, and Sarah corrects them and says a king now rules. Nyktos is no consort; he is my equal. So if I'm queen, then he's king, and everybody's surprised, and they're like, "There's never been a queen and king that rule." But however, there also hasn't been a queen before at all.
They're just
And
changing the rules.
I mean, we're evolving. It's called growth. Um, Sarah says it's my choice, which I think this wording is very like impactful. She says, "Well, it's my choice that Nyktos be king, and I am under the impression that what I say goes." A lot of the time, like choice is a really big theme in
Yeah.
these books. So like the fact that she's saying I'm choosing this is very that's a stabbing noise. I just want to let everyone know that.
Beautiful.
Back to Colas, he'll attempt to control the narrative and label Sarah a usurper or a false queen. Um, and that she was once mortal, that most do not know her, and that she is now a baby primal. And Colas will seek to remind all of them exactly who he is in case they are thinking of defecting. And by reminding them, Bella is like, "You mean by committing some violent, heinous act upon those likely undeserving of it?" And Lila's like, "Unfortunately." So they're kind of just going through, like, essentially what Colas will do, the repercussions of that, and what exactly are they going to do to fix this.
Correct.
Um, She also tells them that he wants the embers so that he could ascend as the primal of life and death. And that is when he spoke of killing all those who wouldn't bow to him. But then he changed his mind when he thought Sarah was Satoria, which kind of creepy that like just because you found the love of your life, like you find some sort of heart in your heart
Yeah.
of hearts. I don't really know.
It's
I will
Colas.
say
Everything's creepy.
Sarah is giving Colas like this benefit of the doubt that like he doesn't necessarily want war, and that this plan, like best case scenario, she's really going best case scenario with this plan of theirs. Um,
Yeah.
that's why he doesn't want war. That's why he didn't attack Shadowlands forces. He knew what he was doing. He knew that doing so would escalate the situation. And they're all like, "But and you believed him?" Um, and she says that when Kin wanted to level the Shadowlands to make an example out of his court, Colas denied him. And again, that was before he believed I was Satoria. He had no reason not to allow Kin to do as he pleased, other than knowing what would come out of it. We still hate Kin, by the way, in case anyone was curious.
Always and forever.
Um, this is what I don't understand, though. I feel like, and I guess we learn this later in the book, but like Colas is kind of one step ahead at all times, except for, I guess, in this moment when he's incapacitated. But I don't know why Sarah like not defends, but like is giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I
And I
think
know that's in her nature. I feel like that's just who she is as a person, as a being.
I think
I
it
don't
might
know.
be a slight trauma response too. Like that's the only thing I can think of is that like she saw different parts of him of when he was Colas, and we always knew that he was very charismatic and can be very convincing. And I think she's letting those parts that she saw of him take over when in reality we know his nature is truly not like that. Because it confused me too, and that's literally the only thing I can think of for why she even gave that kind of consideration
I
for it.
agree. And then I think another a good example of this is the last paragraph of this chapter that says, um, that Ash says, "You see him being more cautious, possibly more reserved in his actions, and perhaps even reasonable, since he seemed to understand that he couldn't win a war without rising as the primal of life and death. But I see a far more unpredictable Colas, one who is on the verge of losing what power he has and won't be as careful about when and where he strikes." And I think that this is like we see him as this all powerful, shitty being that we've dealt with for thousands and millions and trillions of years. That's a very
Mm-hmm.
big exaggeration. And she's just kind of coming in as somebody he sees as the love of his life,
Right.
and kind of like the humanized version, demented, but humanized ish version of him. So
Correct.
valid, but also, um, Yeah. So then we get into chapter 11. They had this whole conversation about their plans. Essentially, they're going to entomb him or attempt avoid war if possible and hope for the best. That was that was Cliff Notes version.
That's very Cliff Notes version.
Yep. Chapter 11 goes into her essentially freaking out because she's not ready for, being queen, let alone planning a war, which is inevitable. She's not a strategist, and she's far more better suited to fight than like the actual planning of the war. And she's like, I'm going to be honest here. I don't know the correct answer, nor will I pretend I do. I'm sure that that's not very reassuring. That's the truth. And she's saying this to all of, essentially her friends, like this ensemble of all of our besties.
Correct.
And Layla chimes in and she's like, I'd rather have someone acknowledge a lack of experience than pretend, thus needlessly risking lives in the process. And Rain says, knowing when to rely on others is a strength, one that inspires confidence instead of worry. And I think that this is a good, side by side to her, like her trauma and like needing help kind of processing and not necessarily getting over it, but getting through it.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially since she's never been really allowed to ask for help. So seeing people be like, no, we're glad that you asked for help and like reassure her in that way of like, of her plans of like, I know I don't know everything, and people being like, we're glad you don't know everything kind of thing. Like, I feel like that would be very reassuring to have.
exactly. And even Belle is just like, all of y'all are being logical and I don't like it, respectfully. Like I expected better from you in turn, like essentially stab first, ask questions later, ask for forgiveness later. Um, and Sarah is very much like me and Ash discussed us being better than the enemy, which
Yeah.
I get, but like the killing and the fighting is inevitable.
And they come up with a
Um,
good point too, because she's like, I want to be a better ruler than him. And they're like, listen, anything would be a better ruler than
Hezekiah would be a better
the
ruler.
Decai. Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then she drops the bomb of
The bomb.
summoning the primals, excluding Vessets and Kin because they can fuck right off, which I don't disagree. And sounds like to the Shadowlands, that's a huge risk. And she says, I know those who answer the summons will likely support our claim to the throne of Elysium, but those who may not support us could send spies in their place, gods of their court. Everybody's voicing their concerns. And um Ash is like, we won't let any gods to show in their primal's place. And she's talking about how essentially they want to create a court, a board of
The
primals, a court of
council.
primals, a count. Okay, why can I
You
never
can
remember
never
the
remember
term
that word.
council ever in my life? Um.
Oh.
Anyway, the god. So it's a coveted. They're talking about Elysium and all
Yeah,
these
we learn a lot
god
about the
primals.
politics of
Yes,
Elysium in this chapter.
we could do like a whole diagram, but we won't, respectfully.
Oh, that sounds so boring.
Um, the gods oversee the smaller cities or islands, often turning them into mini fiefdoms. What the heck is a fiefdom? Some are ruled justly and others cruelly. Um, and essentially, she's trying to not convince them, but share how having this council will benefit them in the long run. Um, okay. How do we pronounce a god of
Um,
dreams? Onaru? Owner?
oh, so I was going to tell you what a fiefdom is. It's basically a field, an area of open land, especially one planted with crops or pastures, typically bounded by hedges or fences. A piece of land used for a particular purpose, especially an area marked out for game or sport. So it's just
Interesting.
empty land.
Okay, then. Well, that's helpful, I guess. Um, so yeah, then they're talking about who essentially would be a problem, who won't be a problem, what courts, like how each primal rules their court. Kind of shitty, whatever. And Belle chimes in about Maya and says she's not necessarily bad, having spent the last several hundred years more focused on entertaining herself than governing. Some of her cities are rather calm, others are
Mm-hmm.
pretty much a giant, she was gonna say orgy, but then she sees the kids. They are like giant adult parties, not bad, not really productive or useful, So sometimes things get a little heated and not in a good way. There's lots of jealousy-fueled murders, and sometimes they fail to harvest crops or search for children who wander the forest or even realize they're missing. So it's like neglect. Essentially, her court is just neglect. And then they talk about Vestas, and honestly, I don't want to give her any more time than I need to.
We know her place is corrupt and messed up. That's all you need to know.
And then they kind of talk about anyone whose court, like the person's not like Vestas's court. We could Vestas, and then Sarah could ascend somebody to take their place. Or Sarah could take that court as her own. The primal of life can take a court, and with the energy going into her, it would lessen the impact of there being no primal to rule, which we see kind of that happening later on in the book. And it is unlikely that we could defeat those courts with Colas, Atis, Keela, and one really underperforming court. Not only do we need as much support as we can get, but we also want things to be different. So essentially she's just trying to influence change, hope for the best. And then so they're talking about all these politics and all the courts and ascending people and changing the rulers and really cleaning things up. And Belle's like, well, what comes next? Yeah, and Sarah goes, I think you'll enjoy this answer. We remove Colas from the throne. And Belle's like, violently? And Ash is like, is there any other option? And Belle's like, no. And then she smiled in a way I should have found disturbing, but didn't.
I love Belle.
I love her too. I think that she is such an impactful, like, bad bitch character, and I really hope she's in this next book.
Oh, she
I
better
feel like
be.
she has to be. She has to be, right? Like, she's about to fight this war and help them, and like her
If I
court's
don't
about to
have a
come out.
small appearance from all of them at some point, I will not be happy.
Yeah, pretty much. So then they're going to try to entomb Colas. And it won't be easy, obviously. And then they're talking. Oh, then Sarah drops the bomb of the ancients have been entombed for thousands of years, and Rahar is like, "Wait, what?"
Come again?
And
She's
she's like,
really
"Not
dropping that
all,
ancient bomb on people.
but like it's
This,
casual." She's literally like,
yeah.
"Oh, y'all didn't know this shit." Like she's like, "Not all the ancients entered Arcadia or were killed. Some could only be put into the ground. That is where there must be balance. Why there must be always life and death. Why there must always be life and death." I can't read. It's fine.
I think it's funny how she was the one that came in and knew so little about any of this. And in some ways,
Now
she
she
still
knows all.
does. But she also has this knowledge of really powerful stuff like the ancients and how things came to be. And she's just dropping it, expecting them to know it because they already know so much. So it's funny to see that, like, she'll casually drop this and everyone's like, what? And then other things, they'll mention stuff and she's like, huh? It's just so funny to see that dynamic.
It was really a full circle moment for her. Now she wields so much power or like knowledge. Um Essentially, she also says that if the balance isn't kept, like the ancients will wake, and Belle's like, do we want to know what happens? And
Gonna find
she's
out.
like, they'd finish what they started when the primals rose against them. Colas would be the least of everyone's worries. Either way, we need to discover how the ancients were entombed. What worked for them will work on Colas. And so then Ash says that they're going to speak to Keela. I will say, Keela plays such an important role in this book, and it literally took 3/4 of the book before we finally have this discussion.
That's true. I didn't hear speak to Keela. I heard speak tequila. And I'm like, they're gonna speak the language of an alcohol?
Yes. When I drink tequila. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's a Dan and Shay song.
That's not the song I was thinking of, so
Of course it wasn't. And so then they're like, so we entomb Collis for what, 1,000 years? And Sarah's like, that will ensure the balance is kept. Nyctos will continue as the primal of death, and I as the primal of life. And then they're like, or until Satoria can be used, her soul could be released once Colas is safely entombed, and then once she is old enough, then Colas will be no more. And then Theon's like, now that I like this sound of. Which, knowing that we're getting Primal next,
mm-hmm.
I just feel like we're gonna get screwed. I know that she's a happily ever after writer Okay.
But shit's still gonna happen.
Like, we're gonna lose somebody.
Probably gonna.
I'm
Oh, if we lose one of these characters in Primal.
we have to lose a main character. Like,
I
I
know we
don't
do, and I'm
want
so
to say
terrified
it.
of who it is.
I
Like,
don't
is it
want
gonna
to
be
say it.
Tawny? Is it gonna be like
But
Emil
then
or
the thing
Nail or
is it one from each round, like each series? Do we, like, there's no way we can't lose some impactful characters. Anyway, let's not what is it? Don't
does Nectus die getting Jadis back? Like, I will riot.
I don't know in what world that's what you should have said. In no world should we ever wish harm on Nectus.
I don't wish harm on any of them, but it came up in my head, and I'm like, but that's what Nectus would do. He would give his life trying to save his daughter. Ugh.
Anyway, moving on from this terrible, terrible thought train that we're at. Ash
It's better than
also
thinking about the bones.
my bones, those would regrow. Someone commented and confirmed. Okay, so anyway, Ash also talks about discussing with Attis in terms of the bones. I want to say it's about the bones.
It's all about the bones.
Well, it's usually all about the bones.
All about the base.
But he essentially is getting Attis for help. Because he is a useful primal. And
Even if
Ash
Ash
is like,
hates him.
I don't know why we all thought this was a good idea, but Sarah can't go because then her presence would be felt.
I don't think anyone but Ash thought it was a good idea. Let's be honest. No one thought it was a good idea.
Also true. And so then Nectus comes in and he calls her Mia Liesa, and Sion's like, she doesn't like to be called that. And Nectus is like, I know, but she will allow it of me.
She says
she
true.
Goes, I will. And Belle goes rude. And I think it's so funny.
I love it.
And then they're talking about Jadis and hope she hasn't been a handful. And Nectus is like, I feel like I may have walked into the middle of an argument. And Sion's like, I would say it's more of a heated exchange. And he's like, about? And Ash is like, Sarah and I are not in agreement. And Nectus says, as unsurprising as that is, whose side am I supposed to be on? And they both answer mine at the same time. And Sarah says, Ash has suggested using Attis to issue issuing the summons. That's what it was. My brain was not braining. And thinks it's appropriate for him to speak with Attis, even though he wants to rearrange the primal's internal organs. Meanwhile, he thinks I should remain at the palace polishing the swords or something. And Rahar dies of laughter, and I think that's so funny. And Ash is like, I feel rather confident assuming the only thing you would do with the sword is use it. And she's like, do you want to find out? And he's like, later when the younglings aren't present, I'd love to. And then, it becomes into some sexy banter that these men are crazy. And Nectus is like, her presence would be felt. And Ash is like, exactly, Kin will know you are there. And she said, that's fine by me. I would love to speak with him, aka that's a stabby motion and noise, in case nobody could get that.
No, that is not her microphone crackling. It is just her doing sound effects.
It's just me. Belle's like, gods, now I'm going to be illogical. You are a fledgling primal like me, and you know how much I hated having to lay low, but I did. I'm still doing it until there's no choice but to take the risk. I want nothing more than to take my revenge on Kin in any way I can, but I know doing so right now is too risky. And yeah, I hate having to be logical about it. You may be stronger and stuff, and able to take on Kin even now, but why risk it over that piece of trash? She's like, okay, I get it. I just don't think I should go alone.
Being logical.
Honestly, like, yes, exactly. It's like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, and like the devil's Belle, and then she like somehow shapeshifts into the angel for one moment.
I know, she's
in her
like,
life,
one second, like does this weird like twisty animation transformation, has the halo, says what she needs, and then goes back to the devil.
Exactly. And Sarah's just like, I don't want Ash to go alone. Lila offers to go with him. And
Theon loves that.
Yeah, Theon loves that. Attis, I'm sure, will love that. More on that later. And Lila's like, Attis will be reluctant to allow things to escalate with me there. And Theon's like, you have far too much faith in him. And Ash is like, uh, I can agree with that. And Layla's like, and you've never had enough faith in him. He's not like his brother. Oh, they kind of love each other, and it's so cute. She
I
has
ship
to
it.
be. She has to be the
I was
descent.
literally just thinking about that. Like, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about Layla and Attis. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that could be who Cass is descended from. But at the same time, Miss JLA said that who says that he didn't maybe hide some of his kids and that who maybe they didn't all die. So I'm like, maybe he's descended from one of those kids. And I'm just I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, I don't know. But also we're gonna hope for the Lila and Attis train, you know?
We really are.
We're gonna hope. Um and then um they have to address the people essentially with all of these, the shelter, the food, all that good stuff. Um and Sarah's like, we can convey that because Ash is trying to like protect her again, and Ash is like, it's not necessary for you to do this, and she's like, it is. The people risk their lives to come here for us. And Nectus is like, for you, and then is like, no offense to Ash. Um, Going before them and letting them know is the least I can do, and I need to do this. Look, speaking and being all queenly in front of them, in front of an entire city, makes me want to barf, but they need to see and hear me. If I can't do that, how will I be able to convince the primals to support us or handle the ones that don't?
Yes.
Rahar's
And
like, she has a point.
I like we love Ash because he felt her spike of anxiety and he's trying to protect her. But I feel like this is one of those times that being able to feel the emotions that she projects is a negative because he's trying to like protect her from all the trauma she's already felt and stop her from having to feel more. But at the same time, it's one of those things that you can't do that. You have to continue to move on and move forward in order to heal and to get over some stuff.
Yep. And so they're going to speak to the people first, and then they're all going to go about their situations and their plans.
Yep.
Um and um Ash, so soldiers are like bowing and doing all these things, and she's really feeling uncomfortable, and Ash is like saying they're not just paying homage to their queen, they're telling you that they are yours and that if it comes down to it they will go to war for you. And she's like, for us, and he says for us. And I think that that's so impactful that the people of that town, like, they don't know her, but the
Yeah.
soldiers are willing to risk their life, like they respect her enough to do that. um then they're talking about army sizes and kind of, Thanos has the second largest army. I still am unclear how I feel about Thanos. Like, we get into it more in later in the book, but I just feel like from when he saved her, I just feel like there's some residual, I don't know,
His
not
story
respect, but
definitely it didn't pan out the way I expected it to, and I don't know if I'm disappointed by that. Like
I'm just not
I
sure.
I totally expected in the end that he would help
Go on
them
their
and
side.
then he didn't and I was confused and like I
Maybe
think
he gets the redemption arc in the next book,
didn't he die in this one though? I thought he died.
but like a residual redemption arc.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Because yes, he does, but like, I don't know. I just feel like maybe he had some failsafe in place. I don't know. I
Like
don't know. It's just something about him just made
I
me feel
get
like,
that he felt Scion ascend, and so he was like, "Oh no, they're gonna try and kill me." So he went where he had to go. But I just feel like it was anticlimactic in a way. I didn't expect that with Thanos. I expected something else with him, and so it was kind of disappointing.
yeah. So then they're talking about armies, and then they're talking about Draken. Colas has a legion of a dozen. Kin has about 10, and Embreeze and the other courts have 5 or fewer. Um, and um, she's just like sad about the numbers of Draken because under Colas's rule, like she can imagine how difficult it would be to bring in younglings. And Ash is like, we have the most, 15, not including the younglings, and we have Nectus. And I love that he like categorizes Nectus as like his own being.
Yes.
But essentially, like, glad we have more Draken, but at the end of the day, like, they would be outnumbered. But she, you know, she needs to still talk to the other primals, and, like, if Thanos or Ember stood with Colas, like, really, they'd be fucked. But neither here nor there. And that's kind of where this circled through that whole chapter, just talking about numbers and politics and armies.
Yes, those past couple of chapters were very heavy on just like the politics of the land and learning more about how the inner workings of the courts.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
chapter
then
12, we get to move on. It starts out
Yay!
with Rain insulting her in a way. Because he's saying, I agree what Ash said about keeping the address short and to the point when she's talking to the people of Lethe. That would limit the probability of something being said that shouldn't be. And she's like, exactly what did he think I would say that I shouldn't? And honestly, he has a good point, because our girls tend to ramble, and sometimes when you ramble, things come out that shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But they're kind of talking about what's going to happen during the addressing of the people. And she's kind of like, well, I have to walk the aisle again. And he asks, do you want to do that? And she said no. And then he's like, okay, I'll announce you. And then Ash and you guys can shadow step onto the die. No, it's the dais. I don't know why I'm listening to you. It's dais.
Listen, I don't know. Don't look at me. I just pronounce things, and if it's wrong, it's wrong.
I was gonna say it, and then I was like, wait, no, Steph like corrected me last time, and I was like, wait, no, I looked it up. She was wrong. Anyways,
Still gonna say die.
That's fine. So and she's like, wait, why am I gonna be announced first? Because she's used to like the king being announced, and he says that's because mortals operate in a very patriarchal society. And she says, as if this one is any different. And he says, you have a good point. But then he goes into it doesn't have anything to do with gender. It's purely about power. You're the true primal of life. And even if you guys are ruling jointly, you supersede him. Like, yeah, you're stronger in essence, basically. You're going to be announced first. And she doesn't think that sounds equal at all. But moving on. And he says, then you guys will sit on the throne, and before you ask, it's tradition. I
love that they already, like, know, not her quirks, but, like, they know her well enough to know what she's uncomfortable with, or, like, what situations are.
I think Rain just assumes at this point, if it's traditional, she's going to have an issue with it.
That's also very fair.
And he takes on, like, even though they have this weird connection now that neither of them are really willing to talk about, he takes on very much I call him the mother hen. He's like making sure that she's ready for all this stuff, making sure everything's going how it should be. He's like their assistant in making sure that everything is taken care of, and he's very protective of her as well, that you see later on. But I don't know, Rain just cracks me up with his dynamic in the group.
So he, like, technically, if we were to draw parallels, he'd be like the Kieran that's not as close to them, because he is like the advisor, you know what I mean? But so I think that it's so interesting how close and how big of a bond Poppy and Cass have to Kieran. Not to say, like, clearly Sarah, like, risked a lot of herself for Rain, but it's just like a different, just a different dynamic.
That's a very good comparison, because I was literally just trying to think. I was like, would he be more like Delano, where he's a part of the group but off to the side? I was like, but that doesn't make sense. But I think comparing him to Kieran is very good, because Kieran did do a lot of that stuff. His just bond with them is a lot more close knit.
Yeah,
that's a good. I like that. I like that comparison.
I try.
And then they're talking about like food and like and wine, and Rain is looking at a list that Sarah is calling the Annoy Sarah list.
Tracks.
But they don't have enough time to have food, but they have wine, and Eos is in there as well, helping her find a gown, and none of the gowns are really like working for her. She's not liking any of them, and we know a lot of it comes from the fact of she had to wear the gowns when she was with Colas, and so she kind of has a weird thing for them. And so Rain is trying to tell her, like, you have to wear a dress for the role, and she's like, but that's not really me.
Correct.
And she says, the gown is not me. They found a tunic that's almost long enough to be a gown, which part of me wants, like, I'm trying to get a visual in my head of how that looks. But it's a tunic that goes down low enough that it's almost a gown. And she's like, this is me. And he says, is that you as a queen? And she's like, I don't see why it can't be. Like, and I agree with her. Like, he's trying to go based off of tradition, and she's saying, look, I want to be me as a queen. I don't want to pretend to be who I'm not.
It's like when this is a terrible example, but kind of just not humanizing it, but making it more relatable is like, I think a good example is us. So, fun fact, we met on the internet. Shocker, as many
Woohoo!
people. But like I used to stream on Twitch, so a lot of people that I've met are from my streamer days. And I've met multiple people from that time in my life, and they're like, every single time I've met them in person, they're just like, you're the exact same person that you portray yourself as online, which to me is a huge compliment because like who and I get like the privacy of it all. So it's not like I'm trying to say like don't keep things to yourself, but it's just like why would I be anyone else, or why would I put a facade? Why would I
Right.
persona? Like why would I do that to myself? It's more exhausting to be any less of an authentic version of myself. Like that's just I respect
It's
her for
true.
this.
I have streamer friends because we were both streamers. I still stream. Steph
Correct.
doesn't, but I have streamer friends that I'm very close to, and it's very interesting because like they do have a streamer persona versus who they are in real life, and some of it interconnects and some of it doesn't. And I get why, like they've explained why they do it, and I get it, but and I've tried to do that, and I can't. Like I can't do that. It's too exhausting. It's too like I'd rather just be me, and like if people are there, they're there. If they're not, they're not. Um, and Sarah even kind of like goes into that because because he's like, oh, did the queens in the mortal realms wear dresses? And she says, I don't know every queen in the mortal realm, but from what I saw, no. But you know what I also saw? And she says, a queen who wore pretty silk gowns and glittering jewels, and at the end of the day, she was a terrible queen. So you can put on
Retweet.
the fanciest things that you need to, but that doesn't, what you wear isn't what makes you a good person or a good ruler. It's what your actions and what you're doing.
Correct.
And even Eos came in and said, like, I've interacted with the people of Lethe, and I don't think they'll care like what she's wearing. In fact, I think the less finery would be better to show that she's not invested in being like fancy. She's just being her.
She's not materialistic, you know?
Yeah. We literally just took that drink at the same time. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. And she has, and he's thinking no one's gonna think that's a gown, blah 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 blah. And she's remembering, does he not remember what I was wearing when he came to Deos? It was more of a, this is more of a gown than what I wore there. And finally he gives in, but he says, I suggest when you meet with the primals, you wear something different. Those like Empress will expect you to present yourself in a certain way. And she says, I couldn't give a rat's ass how Empress expected me to present myself, but Rain wouldn't be happy with the answer. So she says, I'll consider it.
Mm-hmm. Good for you.
And then Ash comes in and he sees her holding that tunic and he says, is Reaver under the dress? And she's like, ha, he thinks it's a dress. So to her, the argument's won. Rain is done. And she's like, and yes, he's helping. Oh, sorry. And he's like, I'd like to speak with my wife before supper. And she's like, my wife, I love those words. And Eos remembers that, oh hey, how do we say her name? I don't know if
Erlina.
Erlina, thank you. I was like, Erlina?
No, Erlina.
Yeah. Erlina was there and wanted to see her, and she told her she was busy, and she was really surprised by that because she's not used to people wanting to see her.
Mm-hmm.
And so she says next time she comes by, I'd like to see her. And then she asked them, wait, where are you guys having dinner? And they said, like, probably in the hall, or me and Belle will be having it in our chamber, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
she decides that she wants her and Ash to have supper with them. Because I know, it's like a little family moment, and it's so sweet. And Rain is super surprised by this. But Eos looks super happy. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, let's go make sure there's enough chairs. And he's like, it's a dining hall. There are plenty of chairs. And she's like, let's double check. And like pulls him out
Get
of the
out of
room.
here, bro.
And she was like, did Rain seem surprised by that? And he says, well, we haven't joined them for many suppers. And before you, I didn't do it often. And it's like, oh, that's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sorry, I just scrolled over to the next page and I just saw a highlight and it cracked me up.
oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so they're talking and oh, I went the wrong way. I wonder what you have highlighted on this page, because I don't have anything highlighted on this page.
You know what's even funnier is that I'm looking at your highlights. That's so funny.
Oh,
It's
is it
fine.
what I put in the notes?
No,
Oh, how are you looking at my highlights then? I'm so confused.
that's okay.
I wonder if our pages are a little off. Anyways, but so they're kind of talking about her projecting of being surprised by people wanting to see her, and he's reassuring that it's not bad to be surprised by that. And then they're talking about earlier when they went to go see the soldier, she saw the deadwoods and was kind of feeling certain feelings about that, and she was thinking about the shades, which we try not to think about.
Correct.
She was thinking about that one in particular shade in a book previous where she had touched it and it started to come back to life. And she's like, I was thinking about how powerful my touch was. I could bring back a shade. Even then, who knows how long it had been dead. And he said, based on the state, I'd say quite some time, likely several decades, if not longer. And she said, that's kind of creepy. And he said, just be careful when touching dead things.
Mood.
She said, that's possibly the strangest advice ever spoken. So Poppy just has to not touch things, because she touched things and all hell breaks loose. Sarah just has to not touch dead things. So,
It's fine.
It's in the family, guys. It's just in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked if that's what made her nervous when they rode past. And she wanted to immediately shrug it off. We'll give her props for thinking through it before just immediately shrugging it off. She said, I could feel the essence inside me as we rode past and thought I could see them following us through the trees. I think they may have felt my presence. And I was glad we weren't going into the woods, because I worried I may do something I shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's she's trying to figure out that balance of like when to know to bring something back to life and when not to. And he says, I know my father struggled with that. I also know he used the ability far more in the beginning than he did towards the end. When people came to one of his temples to plead for the return of their loved ones, it was hard for him to ignore it, especially if the deceased was young and the death unexpected. He would almost always grant those requests, even knowing what he did about mortals, of where he granted one request, someone else would have to die.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this last episode, I want to say, like how are you supposed to know when you're supposed to do the right thing, or like what's the right choice, and the foresight was like, you don't.
Exactly.
It must have been really hard. Well, I don't know if it was really hard, because I guess his ego was his monster inside of him, or
Yeah.
whatever. So I guess for him it was a no-brainer. Like, it didn't matter as long as the people who asked for help like saw him in this light of feeding that ego. Oh, that's
Correct.
tragic. That makes it even more sad, actually. Well,
when the epiphany is like, oh.
pretty much. That was how that just went.
Sounds like our lives, man. Yeah.
True.
No, I agree. It's the ego thinking like, and I think it's also that part of them that they weren't supposed to have, of those human emotions
Mm-hmm.
of like, even if you're the primal of life, it can be hard to be like, well, what's fair in a child dying so young or someone dying so unexpected or things like that. And then I think sometimes you forget to think about what the
Consequences of your actions
I
are.
didn't want to say consequences, but I guess there's no better word. But the
Effect your actions have.
effect of it, yeah, the
Yeah.
what's gonna come next. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think that sometimes you just forget, well, this is gonna take someone else's life because you're so in the moment of the emotions with the life that they're begging for right there.
Yeah.
It could be interesting. Um but they're talking about the summoning of the primals, and she mentions how the night she was born, her father summoned Colas, not knowing that Ethos was the one who had originally made the deal.
Yeah.
And Ash is kind of like trying to figure out why, and then he realizes he didn't want that kind of future for his daughter. And Ash says, what father would? If I were to have a child, I wouldn't want them to live a life of no choice, one where their future was already determined for them.
Well, that sucks.
You know, as a parent, I understand you don't want that life for your child, but
Knowing where this book goes,
that's the life your child unfortunately kind of has to have. And it's so sad too, like him saying that. It's like, you know what's coming because you read the previous books, and you're just like, oh, so sorry to tell you the truth, my dear.
Mm-hmm.
And then she kind of goes into her emotions of knowing that Colas always knew about her and about the Embers, and she feels sorry because she feels like everything Ash did to protect himself and her was for nothing. Like the deal, his Cardia and the deal with Vessus and everything he did to protect her from Colas, she felt like was for nothing, because in the end he already knew about it. There was nothing they could have done.
I think it's wild, like, looking back, knowing what we know now up to this point, but reading it for the first time, the fact that he knew everything is so fucking tragic.
I know.
I'm sad. Sorry.
Yeah. It makes you really think, and it's moments like that I think that people go, "Welp, I gotta reread it now."
Yeah, honestly.
And that's why I love doing rereads, because I feel like I get a new understanding, and I'm like, oh, this changes like this line, or this changes like what's going on in this, and you get to reread it almost for the first time, but with that new knowledge, and it's like, oh, this changes everything.
Pretty
Um,
much.
and I think that's good writing right there, when you can reread it with new understanding and it makes you feel almost different emotions. And I love it. But Ash is reassuring. He said, "It wasn't for nothing, Sarah. I don't regret a damn thing I did to keep you safe. And it's not something you ever need to apologize for." And surprise, surprise, her calming breaths are not helping her. And she's like, "How can you not be mad? You kept yourself away from me out of concern for Colas. You had people watching me. Lathan died doing so." Lathan? Lathan? Whatever.
Lathan.
Okay. And he says, "I haven't forgotten any of that." And then she brings up Vessus, and he's like, "I haven't forgotten that." And she's like, "Then why aren't you furious?"
Well,
And
because
yeah,
it ain't worth
right.
it, honey.
And she's like, "I am." And he's like, "I never would have guessed that. You should calm down." And she said, "Hearing that makes me want to do the exact opposite." And that's like mood. Don't tell someone to calm down when they're mad, honestly.
Honestly.
He says, "My apologies." Um, he says, "I'm choosing to ignore the lack of sincerity." No, she says, "I'm choosing to ignore the lack of sincerity in your tone." And he says, "And I'm choosing not to let anger over something I cannot change consume me." I feel like
So
they've
smart.
switched roles in a way here, because usually he's the one that when something's wrong with her, he's the one having to control his emotions, and she's like, "It's okay, I'm fine, calm down." And this is one of those rare moments where they've kind of switched sides, where he's like, "I'm choosing what I feel, and I'm not choosing not to be angry."
Ugh,
And
what is
she
that
says,
like?
"Then I choose to be angry for the both of us." And right before this, it said, "My fingers lifted from the table as a scorching, pulsating energy coursed through them." And he says, how about you choose not to levitate? And she's like, how about what? And find out she is levitating. She's not on the table. She's like, her feet are completely straight at this point. She's moved up so much. She's several feet above Ash. And surprise, surprise, the shock of it makes her stop doing it, and she falls, and he has to catch her. And that doesn't even faze them. They go right back into the conversation. He says, neither of us can change the past, undo the decisions we've made. I'm not saying it isn't fucked up. It is. But I refuse to allow anger over what is already done and over with to rot me inside. The deal I made doesn't matter.
Mm.
And she's basically like, we're just gonna have to disagree on that. And then they go back to talking about the summons and how it feels, and he says, pleas made with extreme emotions, those are the ones that reach us, because he's saying not all of them reach us, just the ones that are kind of like they're having extreme emotions are what gets to them. And she asks what it feels like, and he says it's kind of just like a pull within inside you. It's like a tugging sensation that's taking you where you need to go, demanding you to do something, kind of thing. But he says you can choose to answer or not to. And she says, well, you do. And he says, only because anyone who summons a primal of death does it at their own risk.
Honestly, he's real for that.
Yeah. He says there's no wrong or right way to handle it, only what you're comfortable with, and you can change your mind at any time. You will have, however, need to assign gods you trust to act on your behalf. He says it is rare for someone to reach us. It does take a type of desperation most are lucky not to feel. I imagine you don't have the highest opinion of my father after hearing that. And she said, no, that's not the case. I honestly don't know what to think of any of it. I can't exactly judge him. It would be difficult for me to ignore the pleas of the morning when you could do something to ease their pain. And I was thinking earlier about how one decides when to grant life and where not to. Like, obviously, the ability, right? The ability would not have been shared if the ancients hadn't wanted it to be used. And that can never be an easy decision to make. It was one I never wanted to be in charge of making. And it's like, yeah, most wouldn't want that responsibility. She says, I don't think my father ever figured out for sure when it was and wasn't right to do so, but I don't think you'll struggle as much as he did. And she says, why is that? And he says, because you don't have his ego.
There we go.
So yeah, that explains why he did that so much. And they're talking about the meeting and her thanking him for helping her when she was struggling. She's like, you jumped in without making a big deal. It gave me time to find my footing. And he says, I get what you're saying, but I only did what I needed to for you. I only did what I should do. That is never something you need to thank me for.
Love that. Love their dynamic, honestly.
Me too. And then she says, instead of vocalizing my thanks, I could show you. And he says, as long as you're still using your mouth, I'll have no complaint.
Sassy.
I love them. But they have to go to dinner. And so she says, I can give you an appetizer before dinner. And he didn't know what she meant until he did. And it was a good time had by all. And then it kind of jumps to after dinner and everything, and they're asleep in bed, getting ready for bed.
They were in bed.
Oh yeah, Ash readied himself for bed. So she's in the bed. He's getting ready for bed. She's feeling very restless. She has this restless energy, and something is like there's something that needs to be done or to be remembered, something important. This isn't the first time she's felt like this after her ascension. And it's increasing as the days pass. And so we can see that this is like that foresight that Ash was talking about. There's something you need to be done and you're trying to figure it out. That restless energy. And she's thinking back on dinner and just everything. It's like when you're restless and you're trying to go to sleep and your brain won't shut up and it's like jumping from thing to thing to thing. That's kind of what she's experiencing. And she starts to think about like him going to Vathy or their plans tequila. No, sounds like I said tequila.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, it's not about us. Maybe it's something to do with Lethe or the Shadowlands. She's really trying to figure it out. And then she's thinking about the crops, and that's what like triggers like that light bulb moment of wait a minute. Um, and she was thinking about how she's the primal of life. She should be able to do something to help bring the water back. And she's like, no, I could do something. And she looks at Ash and she like shoots up and she's like, I'm the true primal of life. And he's like, I sure hope that's not the first time you're realizing that.
I love him.
She says, I was able to restore life with the ether before. I was able to heal. Are you even paying attention? And she realizes she's wearing kind of a translucent nightgown, so he's not paying attention. He's staring at her breasts because he's a guy. And she said, then she gets his attention back, and she says, "We don't have to wait for the rain or the snow to fall and then melt. I can restore the rivers and lakes in the Shadowlands." That got his attention. And he says, "Are you sure?" And she says, "Yes, I can do it. I can do it now."
Oh,
Da, da,
what a
da.
baddie. What a baddie. And then we get into chapter 13 where she has to do some magic stuff. So apparently she doesn't know how to put on normal clothes.
He
She
doesn't
was
either,
that
apparently.
eager. He wore pants. She wore her translucent nightgown.
Yeah, but all he wore
Listen.
is pants. Like,
That's fine. Whatever. She was that eager to test out the feeling, telling me I could do something, and she's like, I didn't know if Ash believed me or was simply humoring me, but he hadn't even insisted to take a few moments to think it over. Good for him. And so they're going to essentially heal the rivers. I really wanted to say the mountains, the valleys, the rivers, but whatever. And there's something in the sky, and it's our BFF Ethan.
Ethan!
We're never gonna say that name ever again.
I want you guys to know that we'll be reading this silently, and then one of us will just randomly go, Ethan! And then we'll just keep reading.
Pretty much. And Ash comes to the realization that she sensed which Draken it was. And she was like, I did, or at least I think I did. It feels like an echo or an imprint of who they are. Is that what you feel? And he says, I guess that's how I would describe it. And she's like, how is he? Like, obviously he's not great because he lost his sister. And
Poor Ethan.
Ash is like, he mourns, but he's not lonely. He still has family, his cousins, and those not by blood. And Crowley is flying with him. And
who is his cousin?
Who's his cousin, and she's briefly seen them. And so they get to essentially where she needs to heal the nature. I don't know what to tell you other than heal the nature. And Ash
bringing
is just like,
back the water.
Yeah, heal the nature. Do you know what needs to be done? And she's like, would you believe me if I lied and said yes? And he says, not when you just admitted you'd be lying. And she comes to the realization that there's no stale lilac scent. Like, there's no, like, sense of the rot at all.
Of death and rot.
Yeah, and he's like, it hasn't smelled like that since you ascended. The rest of the grass will come back without any intervention. And she was like, there were animals here, right? And he's like, there were. And so she asks, like, what kind? And there's deer, livestock, wolves, tree bears, all manner of birds and serpents. And she was like, you didn't need to tell me that.
You asked.
And she was like, there were also animals never seen by most mortals, beasts both large and small. And he was like, too many to name, but the Shadowlands once home to the Larue. I'm going to call it Larue. It might be Lyru. It might be Lirway. I don't know.
Larue sounds great.
Yeah, thank you. Essentially, his father created these lesser known beings. Some would say they were a mistake. They were originally mortal, and legend says that my father believed he could give mortals a dual life like he did for the Draken. But this was different. For what he created were beings that were mortals by day and then took the form of beasts similar to wolves but on two legs at night. That sounds creepy.
Disturbing.
And they had no control over their forms once night fell. It's giving what's the thing called in Harry Potter? Not the thing that Lupin turns into. Not the thing Sirius turns
just
into.
a
Not a
werewolf.
werewolf. No, there's a werewolf and then there's an animag. Is it animagus? The two-legged. He's like a hunched.
Sirius is an animagus. Lupus is a
Lupin?
werewolf. Lupin is a werewolf.
Okay, whatever. One of them stands on two legs and is kind of
Yes, that's
creepy and hunched
Lupin.
over.
Yes.
Oh, well then whatever. Flip whatever I just said and there we go. Anyway, there's things about eating people.
Gross.
And it's fine.
Is it?
We're gonna skip over the LaRue. I don't even want to.
Basically, he didn't give him a choice, and they didn't have a choice, and they were happy when they died.
Amen. And so then Sarah has this whole like moment where she knew that things weren't her fault, but she felt responsible for the final thing stolen from Ash and all of those who resided in the Shadowlands, and she wanted to essentially give back. And she's like, I have to do this. It's an urge, and I don't know. I just can't not try. So she Odin's there. And he's scared of the Draken, which cracks me up even more. And Sarah's like, what's his problem? And Ash is like, he feels upstaged, which I just think is funny banter. And essentially they're talking about like willing the water, because that's really like she's using the embers and the ether and she's trying to will the water. And a faint glow appeared beneath the skin of my hand, slowly traveling up my arms. I felt it flowing across the skin hidden beneath my cloak as I lifted my gaze to the river channel. She pictured fresh, clear water filling the waterway, rolling over the parched earth and soothing its cracks and scars. She willed it, holding the image in her mind, and demanded the water show. The glow around her hands intensified, and she was like, water would come. It'll rush through the channel. Energy swells. And then the ground trembles. Ash is like, shit. And Sarah's like, is it possible that I created an earthquake? And he's like, I'm beginning to wonder that myself. We should probably move. And he's like, look what you did, essentially. And she's like, that's not pebbles. And he's like, no, Liesa, it's not. And she said, what I thought had been she thought what I thought had been pebbles dancing in the vibrations were thousands of water drops. I looked down the riverbed a ways, stunned to see small puddles forming.
That'd be
And
so
she's
trippy.
like, it's like raining from the ground. And he was like, but that's what it looks like. And essentially she has willed water to heal the nature. And that is what I'm saying for now on. It's fine.
Heal the nature.
Listen, that's what it is. Tiny silvery lights appeared in the empty air before us, then over the riverbanks, the road, and then everywhere. I sucked in a startled breath. It looked like the stars had descended to the land, and in a way they had. And Ash is like, it's the essence, it's the ether of the realms, of the air and the land. The lights flickered, becoming gold. Pure primal energy flashed from all the stars above and around us, casting the entire court, the entire realm of Elysium, in bright golden light streaked with silver. Along the road, blades of grass broke free of the top layer of soil and spread out, reaching the river and beyond. Fragile stems sprouted, stretching upward as leaves unfurled and red buds formed. Our beautiful, beautiful poppies.
Yay!
And the chapter ends with Ash just being in awe of her and calls her his queen.
As they should.
Because, well, she's kind of a baddie, not gonna lie to you.
You know what I'm sad that we didn't see? Is the wood nymphs and how they actually look. Because they were once beautiful, but when, like, Nectus and Sarah go against them, they're like these spindly, evil little things. And I kind of wish we saw them how they were before Ethos died. That's sad we didn't see that.
Maybe we'll see it in the next book. I don't know why we would, but like maybe the wood nymphs will come to help fight.
Well, maybe they have to go to Elysium for something. Because she is a big baddie primal now.
Exactly. So chapter 14, I'm sure Samantha's really gonna love this chapter. It starts off with her feeling strange and nauseous. And I'm sure Sam is just like, why can't you just tell us now? The big news. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt until later it realized that she was feeling off because of Colas waking up. So I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt for this one, but none of the others.
It's fine. She's like, despite feeling queasy heat pooled low in my core, as weird as it sounded, there was something decadently sensual about a sleeping man I'd never noticed before.
It's true.
And he says
It's
that
because they're quiet.
he could scent, she could scent his arousal, and he says, I can taste. I'm
Go ahead,
actually not
finish
gonna.
it. Finish it.
Nope.
Finish it.
Nope, I am not going to finish that. And she's like, he like is like, be right back, and he then shadow steps from the bed to the bathing chamber, and he's like,
Because he's an impatient man.
he really is. And Sam would like everyone to know that he wins the title of Shadow Daddy because he uses them shadows to his advantage.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, well, and you can read more about that in chapter
14.
14 of this book.
Read the
I'm not
first
reading
like
that.
5-ish pages. It's a great use of shadows.
Correct. There is a lot of spicy spice because the drinks are icy, but the book talk is spicy.
It's not spicy if you won't finish your sentence when you started it.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. Um, and then she comes to the realization that Colas is awake. Um, it wasn't my eyes that met mine. It wasn't my reflection that stared back at me. It was silver eyes streaked with red. It was the face I saw in my nightmares. He had become conscious, aware. That was why I hadn't felt it before, and I would also bet that that is the source of what had awakened me and left me feeling nauseous. Shockingly, Colas had still been in stasis up until this very moment. And Sarah's like, fuck, it's Colas. And she's like, and Ash is like, talk to me. And she tells him that she could sense him. And he's like, do you feel him? And she's like, no, I mean, not technically. And she's like, it's more of an awareness. And I'm assuming it's like that bond, like it's a
Yeah.
bond, but it's not a
I think
bond.
it's a true primal of life and a true primal of death thing. Like, because they're
Like
such
it's like a,
opposites and like needed that they
yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
that sense of awareness to a degree
Which
of
is
each other.
weird, I think. Um, and then she's like, it's more of an awareness of him being conscious, and that is all. And he's like, I didn't know that was possible. And she said, I didn't either. Well, I did, but didn't realize I knew. There's a lot of stuff in my head, too much, and it's quite possible that no one else really knew about it, not even Nectus. Um, and he's like, it doesn't change our plans, but she's just like, Colas being awake changes everything.
Yep.
Um, and then they're talking about cars, like Kars, not cars like vroom vroom. Sorry, I
For
felt like
half a
I
second, I
needed
was like, "What?"
And Sarah's like coming to this realization where she couldn't tell before if he was a god or a godling. But she'd known right there that he was one of the rare godlings who entered the culling and survived. It was similar to what had happened when I saw the guard on the rise yesterday. And when she used the essence to fill the riverbed, it restored a lot more than just like essentially the water. The Shadowlands were virtually unrecognizable. A pleasant
She healed
breeze
nature.
swirled through the rise. Thank you.
You're
Listen,
welcome.
she healed nature. And then she thought about the shades. Had her will impacted the shades? The ether stirred restlessly as my steps slowed. The sea of vibrant crimson thinned, and the twisted bare ashen trees appeared, scattered at first, and then becoming more crowded as the woods thickened. Yeah, there's a lot of holes. Not all shades were evil. Well, now they were, but they hadn't all started that way. I wonder if that could convert her will could convert them to be good beings. No, I think that's
I
maybe a
don't.
stretch.
I know because she can control like the life and death, but she can't control like who they are,
Their
like down to their
essence.
core. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Some had just been afraid when they came upon the pillars of Asphodel, terrified that they would be sentenced to the abyss for stealing, telling lies, forgery, or adultery. Shades being adultery. That's okay. Anyway, I'm not gonna think about that too hard. Bad
In their
things, but
past life
sometimes
before they
necessary.
became shades, honey.
Yeah. Mistakes, actions that hadn't damned them until now. Now they were lost. It wasn't the veil yet. I was the Agna Addis, the Great Condemner. I feel like this title of the Great Condemner is going to come up a lot in the next book. Hot take.
Yeah, think.
I also really think that the writers, I'm hoping that the writers become such a prominent part of the next book.
Oh,
Like,
it's
I
gonna be
feel
so
like
interesting.
giving hardcore war, and I'm here for it.
Same,
The
honestly.
Dying Woods belonged to Death, as did the Shades. Just like they were mostly prevented from leaving the Dying Woods, I was blocked from bringing life to that stretch of land. But neither life nor death was absolute. There was something about that. The wards that trapped the souls in the woods sometimes weakened, and I almost brought one back. I had been in the Dying Woods, then touched the shade. That was the difference. Death couldn't break the bond of life's touch. That kind of power, it was the same as I displayed last night. I turned away from the shades and knew what I had done last night had awakened Colas. Oh, that's a sad realization that she
She used
that
a
she
lot of
has.
power. It
She
is a
really
sad
did.
realization, but I'm glad that like she didn't use it. Like when she talks to Ash about it later, she's not like in a woe is me way of I did this. She was like, I know I didn't mean to and I don't regret it. I'm just stating a fact that this is what will come up.
Yeah, and I mean, what did she expect? She's trying to help her people. Like there would be, some consequence
Yeah.
or something. Um, Now she's getting ready to essentially summon the primals. The tunic Eos had picked out was fitted at the breasts almost too tightly,
She's
like
getting
the
ready to
measurements.
address the people.
That's what I said in my head. Shh, it's fine. Measurements might have been just off a little bit, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a big booby. A
Yeah,
big booby.
it's weird. It's a little tight, even though it was measured exactly to my body. Anyways, sorry.
Mm, you're not gonna get it for a few
No,
chapters. You're
no.
really not. Um, and she's anxious, and she's drawing. Whatever. They're distracting, and it's getting to the people. We're going to the people. It's fine.
She's learning that Reaver feels her anxiety, is what's going on.
Correct. And he draws when he's anxious, and he's like, "You're Mia Liesa. I can sense it." And the older Draken know how to block it out, and he hasn't learned how to do it yet. And Jadis doesn't feel anything yet; she's too young.
So it's really just Reaver right now who's screwed up.
Correct, which is fine. It's like a deeper bond that they share.
It's true.
Anxiety bonding. We love that.
Woo!
He's like, I think you'll do fine today, by the way. The people already like you, and after what they saw this morning, they have to love you, so you have no reason to be anxious. And that's so cute. I love him. Um, and Ash and Sarah kiss, and Reaver's like, you two do that a lot. And he's like, one day you'll understand why. And Reaver's like, nuh-uh. And he's like disgusted. It's so funny.
He says, I'll remind you of that when that day comes, and I really hope that happens in the next book. And he brings this back up, and he's like, Reaver.
But remember when you were a youth? And Reaver wants to go with them, and Sarah's like, I know, when you're older, I'm sure it will be fine for you to be with us. And he's like, why am I not old enough now? You two are just giving a speech. And Ash is like, yes, we're only giving a speech, and nothing should happen, but you are too important to take that risk. Understand? And I love how protective they are of Reaver and Jadis.
Yeah.
Rain wants to show them something. He's waiting downstairs. And Reaver's like, probably has to do with gowns. And Ash is like, I feel like I'm missing something. And Sarah's like, you are, but it's nothing interesting. And Reaver is so observant, and he says, every time something serious needs to be said that no one wants me to hear, I'm either sent from the room, tasked to look after Jadis, or others speak in a weird way, that, like they're leaving out words and stuff. And Sarah's like, note to self, Reaver is far too observant.
Yes.
And she's like, we aren't going to talk. I was planning to do more kissing. And he's like, I'll wait in the hall.
He's like, bye. I'm out.
And she tells Ash, that her power, like what she did last night, woke him from stasis, like he felt it. And Ash is like, if that's the case, do you regret what you did? And she says no. And he says, then it is what it is. It's not your fault he woke. And she's like, I don't regret it, but I do feel a tiny bit responsible, which is fair.
Yeah.
Like, but I there's some sort of strength that she has that she's just like, I acknowledge this. However, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And she was like, it would have been nice if he still remained in stasis, though. And he said, maybe, but I personally enjoy knowing that it was you being a powerful primal that possibly woke him up sooner than he would have naturally. She's like, I hadn't thought of it that way. And he's like, now you have. We should join Reaver before he comes traumatized by something we're not even doing. And then they compliment each other, looking hot as heck, because they are. And
Yeah, they
then
are.
they see Rain waiting for them. Uh, then Reaver shocked the hell out of her by doing the most childlike thing I'd ever seen him do. He hopped from the next to the last step on the floor, or to the floor, and when we followed suit, minus the hopping, I caught sight of her Har waiting near the vacant marble pedestal with cars. I frowned at the damn pedestal. I really needed to find something to put on it. And Ash is like, you said there was something you wanted to show us, and Rain said, yes, it's the crowns.
Dun dun dun. I want to know. She keeps bringing up that damn pedestal. Are we ever going to find out what she put on that damn pedestal?
Something to do with her inevitable children is my guess, or like their family, or like
Maybe.
a memento
But I
of
just
some
know
sort.
that she doesn't bring up stuff multiple times like this without a reason. And she brings up this pedestal multiple times. Anyways, just something that's
That's
bugging me.
also true. We'll think about it. We'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we're ending part 3. Part 3. Part 4 we'll get to you next week.
Hopefully, I don't sound like death.
She might, but that's okay.
That's true.
Sippin' and bitchin' on everything. Also, our Discord is open to anyone. If you want to join, feel free. Next episode then. I'm trying to think if there's any other housekeeping things. Oh, we have a giveaway. Enter the giveaway. There's a few days left.
Up soon.
Yes, there's a few days left to enter that, so go ahead and do that. Let us know your thoughts of this episode, but also of the book so far. I know we're doing this in chunks, but like there's just a lot to cover, and no regrets.
Yeah. No regrets at all. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's fine. We'll catch you later, bitches. Next week, part 4. So get ready.
Woo!
Get ready. Okay, bye.
Bye.